and Deputy Minister of Basic Education, Dr. Regina Mhaule, and the MEC of Education in this province where this conference is taking place in Gauteng, Mr. Chilwane, and of course the President of Education International, Ms. Susan Hogwood, and the General Secretary, of course, Mr. David Edwards. And I also want to greet the Vice President of Education International, Mr. Magwena Maluleke. I also greet members and the leaders of the 5 trade unions in our own country here who are steeped in education. I extend my greetings to you all and live in the hope that the rallying call that we made when some of us were in the trade union movement, that we should have one industry, one union, one country, one federation, will one day come true. It's wonderful to have all the 5 strong trade unions in our country, but I live in hope that one day you will all unite and be one union. And I say so advisedly, President Hogwood, because as I stand here, I'm the employer to all those 5 unions and their members, and I really prefer to negotiate with one union. So talking to 5 unions who tend to differ from one issue to another does become challenging. And you know, they are so clever, these 5 unions. They play us off against each other. So you move from one caucus room to the next caucus room, and they are all sort of committed to the same objective, but they come from different angles. They're very, very clever. So I want to be clever as well against them and only talk to one union. So I live in hope. It's a real privilege to address this 10th Africa Regional Conference of Education International, particularly with its focus on shaping the future of education on our continent, as well as beyond. And the theme of your conference is Standing Together for Resilient Education Systems in Times of Crises. This resonates very well with the various crises that the people of the world have had to face in recent times. Of course, the one that stands out that has been very globular is COVID-19, but beyond that, there are quite a number of other regional crises. Maybe to be a bit historical, in our case as South Africa, we started off with having to unite and working together to face a crisis in education, which was given rise to by the evil apartheid system. There had to be unity, and the unity also was amongst some of the unions that got together to fight against a terrible education system. And they triumphed and succeeded in installing a much better education system that still needs to be taken out of a crisis situation that persists, largely because of our past. government is spending quite a lot of money, and 6.6% of our GDP is spent on education, and overall almost 19% of our national expenditure is dedicated to education. So it is very high in terms of attention and expenditure of money in trying to resolve the current situation, the past, and the future. So dedication to education is quite strong in our government system. But we're also having to face other crises, and this is where your theme also rings so true. In many parts of the world, on our own continent, the political instability with which the chair referred to also requires resilience. As coups are taking place in various parts of our continent, that requires resilience. Right now, there are wars that are raging in Ukraine and Russia. There's also a terrible war that is raging in the Middle East that is in the process of destroying the lives of innocent people. So these are crises that the education system has to respond to, and crises that education system needs to be resilient in terms of addressing. So I'm rather glad that your deliberations today are going to be rooted on how you can all make the education system, all of us, can make it resilient to be able to withstand all these crises. Some of them have to do with climate change, some with wars, some with terrible incidents like fires and floods that disrupt people's lives. So you couldn't have chosen a better theme for your conference. And I do hope that your deliberations will come up with a number of strategies and actions that will enable the nations of the world, particularly on our own continent, Africa, to be able to navigate our way through all these. And the story of our own country is one of resilience, where communities have united in pursuit of a common cause. And indeed, we find that that tends to be the case in many parts of the world. This is a phenomenon that we saw during COVID, as COVID swept across the globe, and it brought a crisis of unprecedented scale. And as this crisis unfolded, we saw its impact not only on the livelihoods of the people of the world from a health point of view, an economic point of view, but we also saw it having a huge negative impact on education. But it was through the resilience of many of you who are in the teaching field, education field, who were able to steer us through this crisis. The pandemic itself hastened digital transformation in a number of countries around the world, and it altered the patterns of work as well as of education. It forced us to confront and appreciate the essential nature of education, also healthcare, revealing both the robustness and the fragility of our societies in the face of hardships. It was heartrending to see young children dying as a result of COVID, but it was also heartrending for parents who knew that the education of their children was paramount, but who feared to send their children to schools, knowing and fearing that they might be sending them to places where they might never return. So the pandemic was not just a crisis of health, but also of education. It underscored the vast disparities in our education systems right across the world, particularly with the digital divide becoming more and more pronounced. Children in much better working economies were able to find it a lot easier to utilize digital means to educate themselves. But in many other countries around the world, this was a challenge. While some learners adapted swiftly to online learning, others, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, experienced great challenges. And our continent can bear great testimony to this. We saw how rural communities and students with disabilities were disproportionately affected by all this, while schooling disrupted inequalities in education were clearly exacerbated. Now, as we navigated these turbulent waters, the world was confronted with political upheavals as well as conflicts, as I said earlier. Now, these crises further strained what I would call our social fabric, affecting the livelihoods of countless of people in the world, denying many children their fundamental right to education. In these times of instability, it is even more critical for nations to stand united in pursuit of equal access to education for all. Education is a cornerstone upon which societies build their futures. Through education, we cultivate respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the principles of democracy. As the work of the United Nations High-Level Panel on the Teaching Profession demonstrates, the adaptation of education systems to a rapidly changing world is one of the most important tasks of the moment or of the day. This panel draws expertise from diverse stakeholders, experts, including ministers of education, labor representatives, teacher unions, and civil society organizations, and it includes even our own minister, Angie Motshekga, who has participated actively in this. It underscores the importance of educators' voices in finding solutions to educational challenges. And we are very pleased that we have trade unions that are vocal, that are active in our own space here. Educators play a fundamental and irreplaceable role in shaping our societies, and their insights are invaluable in our quest for sustainable solutions. The other important area is curriculum reform. A curriculum reform that should respond to the changing world of work is another very important task. In South Africa, we are on the brink of a significant educational reform with the implementation of coding and robotics curriculum from grades R right at the beginning to grade 9. Now, this initiative is part of our broader strategy to integrate STEM subjects into our education system. By doing so, we aim to equip our learners with the digital skills that are necessary to thrive in a fast-paced world. Another important area for many countries on our continent would be to deal with another crisis that is age-old, that many of our countries were plunged into by force, I would say, colonialization. The impact of colonialization in many countries on our continent had a huge negative impact. And the whole process of decolonization of education has become increasingly important. Now, many learners and students have taken up the cudgels to ensure that we decolonize our education systems. And we and you all as educators need to join this. Now, your discussions at this conference focusing on tackling important issues such as racism, decolonizing education and promoting democracy, and also promoting human rights, and especially trade union rights, could not be more timely. The project of decolonizing education in Africa is not just a matter of academic interest. In many ways, it is a pressing need, and others would say it is a life and death matter, because education being so important in the lives of people around the world, it is much more urgent that we should streamline our education system and cleanse it of the colonial type of ideology that infected our education system. We must challenge colonial theories and practices to build resilient education systems that are centered on African perspectives and experiences. This requires a shift from a Eurocentric worldview to embrace a more diverse and inclusive perspective. We must acknowledge and value the knowledge systems of all peoples and integrate them into our curricula and knowledge selection processes. The responsibility to nurture and defend the right to education extends to all parts of society. Now, labor movements, civil society organizations, and non-governmental organizations operating within the education sphere must work together and must collaborate to protect this critical space. Through such partnerships, we can prepare our learners, our students to be active, to be informed citizens in democratic societies. Now, the role of organizations such as Education International are vital. As advocates for quality education, your mission is to ensure inclusive, equitable learning opportunities for all, and not for some. In our own country, we lived in a country where education opportunities were open for some and not for all. We want to now address that legacy and bury it so that education opportunities and access are open to all South Africans. But the same applies. Same applies also on our continent. The disparities that exist in various parts of our continent as a result of poverty and inequality must also disappear. Education must be for all and not for some. What is also needed are safe and conducive environments where the rights of all learners are respected and upheld. By improving access to education, we can alleviate a number of other challenges and crises that beset many of our learners, or that they have to face. Crises such as instability, crises such as criminal activities in the environments where they learn, crises such as poverty. And this is where we need to work together to empower marginalized communities, where we unblock their potential and contribute to the development of nations. As I conclude, I encourage you to explore the rich tapestry, not only of South Africa, but of our continent when it comes to its history and the culture of this very rich continent. The program director, or was it the MEC for education here in Gauteng, Madume Chilwane, he referred to Africa being the real cradle of humanity. And the tapestry that is here, and the history and the rich wealth that resides on this continent, particularly also when it comes to education and learning systems, is what should be lessons to all of us as we improve our own resilience in learning how to manage crises. Now, you have already been invited to explore this country. For those of you who are coming here for the first time, there's a lot of places where you can go and visit and enrich your own knowledge base about the struggles that were waged in this country and the various places that remind us. The president of SADTU also referred to a place where we have 2 Nobel winners, where they used to live in Vilakazi Street. And in the end, it is how we should broaden knowledge and open up avenues where people can learn. Now, in the end, as we provide access to education, we can ensure that it becomes open to all our communities. And education in the end is not only about sitting in a classroom, it is much broader than that. And this is what this opportunity of this conference also gives you. So thank you once again for the invitation to address this gathering. Your commitment to advancing education, particularly in times of crisis, is crucial for the future of our continent and indeed in the world. I wish you all success in your deliberations, and I look forward to the outcomes of this conference. Yes, President Hawkwood, you have issued a private invitation to me, but you can't keep a secret, because having invited me to come and participate in the opening of your launch next year, I thought we would keep it between the two of us. Now you've made it public, and I think you want me to publicly say I will come. Yes, I will come. Thank you very much.